Hey everybody, happy Saturday. Hope you're all doing great, and I'm going to give it just a couple minutes. And today we're going to talk about why Yahweh and Jesus felt so real to us. But again, we'll give it a few minutes here and let some people enter in. Hope your day is going great. Hope you're having some fun. Hope you got yourself a nice cup of coffee. And for anyone that's sort of just jumping in here and hasn't seen what I've been doing for the last few live streams, the way I'm doing it, and this I'm sure it will adjust as I get feedback and things like that, is that we are going to be sort of having a few minutes where I create a structure of some ideas about the topic of the day. And then I kind of look through some comments for, hey, Casey, look through some comments for how people would add to it and kind of put their own spin on it, give their own examples, etc. And eventually I'm going to be moving shortly, like in the next few days, toward having some more live streams each week where I'm directly inviting people to jump in and actually get on camera and talk and share with us. So for example, just to give you a heads up, I'm going to try to plug this several times because I'd love to get some people really jumping in on this. At the moment, I've got it scheduled for Saturday the 24th. I'm calling it a deconversion poetry slam. I would love to have some people be sharing some poetry. Like obviously this stuff brings out so much intensity of emotion. And so that would be a great time if you've got some poems already written, or you're thinking of writing some, or maybe it's a fresh idea and you're like, yeah, I'll take a stab at it. Write some poetry, see what you come up with. And then if you feel like you're able to do so, come on the video that day and share your poetry. And again, there'll be some other examples too very shortly where I'm going to be having people come in and share their thoughts about stuff, where I'll maybe be a lot shorter. Instead of like half an hour, I'll be like 10 minutes, and then everyone just kind of jumps in for 5 minutes at a time. Anyway, let me jump in here. We're 2 minutes after, so it's probably a good time to start. So the topic I thought I'd address at this point was why Yahweh and Jesus felt so real to us. And I think it's really a critical topic because, hey, Marcia, hey, Marie, hey, Accident Agnostic, again, thank you so much for joining me twice. Well, Miss Big Up, I really appreciate your willingness to support the channel and showing up here and seeing the live streams. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much. But the question of why do they feel so real to us? And we have so many people that have shared their stories and said, I should have seen the discrepancies. I should have seen this and that, all the issues. But a lot of us stay because we just know that we feel him. We feel him in our lives. And I've used the illustration before of the Matrix, but I've also used it in, we're back, thank you. Use it in reverse, where you remember that scene in the Matrix where Neo gets shot, and then Matrix 1, and he gets back up and he sees the code for the first time. Like he's literally looking down the hallway, but they show you the view next from what's he seeing. He's seeing the literal green code going down the walls. And it's funny, my green screen is making me disappear. He's seeing the green code going down the walls. And in a similar sense, it feels like for a lot of us, that's what happens with our perspective on Yahweh and Jesus. We just begin to see them everywhere. I don't mean like literally see him, but we just see God's presence everywhere. So I wanted to talk about that in a little more detail. So just as a starting point for a lot of us, I think we have to say these are not just abstract concepts. They're not like a distant deity, like I believe in him somewhere. We're not deists. We were people who believed this was very real to us, and this was personal. It was intimate. He was in our hearts and our minds. And for some of us, we've talked about how having Jesus, God looking in your mind is kind of creepy. He's like, oh, I can see he's seeing me. What happens when you're thinking, dirty thoughts? Oh, God can see that, and he's judging you for it. But on the other side of it, it's like it's really comforting to know that you're never alone, and this God is so loving to you. So it goes far beyond intellectual assent. It's like an all-encompassing experience that's shaping your emotions, your other relationships, your decisions, your emotions, your psychology. And if you're really serious about it, it ends up permeating every part of your life. You're making the presence of God and Jesus like almost more real than the real world. It becomes more tangible to you. That's really fun. I'm gonna have to work on the green screen. My hand's disappearing a little bit. It's funny, magic. But when you pray, when you read the Bible, you worship, you're experiencing all these moments of joy and excitement with the Lord, intimacy. You do begin to feel like you're really directly interacting with this sovereign God the King of the universe who loves me, and he cares, he's listening, he responds to me, I respond to him. And it's this perceived relationship. It gives you this real strong sense that he's there, a sense of purpose, a sense of, he's guiding me and all that. And when you come to the point of escaping Christianity and you realize that that figure was never real, the shock of it can be overwhelming. And so I think it's helpful to think through, like, what was it that caused us to think this was so real? And so I want to go through a few quick thoughts here. The first part is just the perception that you have, the perception, that sense. I just feel him. I feel he's there. And when you have this emotional connection, where you have this sense, it's almost palpable that God is present there in your prayer time, in your worship, when you're reflecting, and it can be so strong that it kind of overpowers and it eclipses, as it were, the real things in your life. And I remember I was writing a book before I deconverted. It was over 1,000 pages. It was a book about worldview, a worldview perspective of trying to exactly do this, see God's handiwork in everything, that he doesn't do arbitrary things. He's doing things to specifically show you almost like a code or a pattern to say this. I want you to see everything that I've created as not random or evolutionary and that garbage. He was like, I want you to see my character and salvation and the future kingdom in heaven, all this stuff. I want you to see the beauty of who I am and what I've done in all of creation. It's all there, like I've signed it, like a fingerprint, and I want you to see it and understand it. And so you begin to think of God and all these things as more real than the real world. One of the examples I think comes to mind for a lot of us is that when you're in a church service, or especially in one of those like really loud concerts, that you just feel that overwhelming sense of, like, it literally tingles your spine sometimes, especially if the music is done a certain way, very manipulative perhaps. The lights are dimmed and you begin to literally feel your spine tingle. And you have this sense of peace and warmth and love. And a lot of us did attribute it to the Holy Spirit. I know a lot of you have told me that. And it sort of reinforces that belief that God's with you. He's guiding you. He's comforting you. He's meeting with you. I mean, the pastor would actually say, let's invite God to meet with us here tonight. God, we really want you to be here. Let us sense your presence. And those emotions get very intense and they create a deep bond that it can make God feel closer than a human being. That experiential reality of God's presence is often, like I said, accompanied by these physical sensations. You feel the tingling down your spine. You feel warm. Maybe your heart races at certain times. I remember times when I would feel overwhelmed with the love and the sense of, like, God is going to restore the years that the locusts have eaten, where I would come into certain worship services and I would just start crying, because especially when the words are like, God is going to take all the pain and is doing something bigger than you could ever imagine. He's such a good father. And you just feel, enveloped in his love. Again, it makes it feel very, very tangible and real. And yeah, John Johnson's saying it's all psychological. So I'm not seeing every comment, but I'm kind of going back and forth here. But yeah, it's very psychological, but it feels so real. You feel that warmth in your body. The tears might stream down during prayer. And you see these as like a direct encounter with with your God, with the divine. And they're so vivid. They become, as it were, the irrefutable proof that God is real. A lot of us did not do the next part, but I want to bring it up because a lot of people that I interviewed did do this. Hearing God's voice. You're actually hearing like divine communication. And many people have told me they felt like God was literally either speaking to them as if they could hear his voice, or that God was just giving them a very strong impression, but it was like he was speaking to them. And, that still small voice we talk about, that verse, and it's like a perception of a communication that continues this development. Like, I have a personal relationship with God. It's intimate. And it feels like he's actively participating. And especially if you get into that nitty gritty stuff of like, God, what shirt should I wear? And God, like, what should I go there or there? And you begin to feel like God is guiding you, and you pray. And if you ever sense that you prayed and then you felt God's presence saying, do this and not that, then you did it, and then you'd end up seeing something good come. Oh, I got a chance to witness today. It's like, wow, God orchestrated this, and this, so I could get to there. What an amazing God. He's involved in the little things, including like whether you get the red light or the green light whether you're stopped or you keep going. The timing of it, the timing of the traffic, he's involved in it. A lot of us too would do our Bible verses and our Bible studies where we would think that the Bible verses were directly addressing a specific situation in our lives. So we would kind of come to God and say, God, like, I'm really struggling with this or that. Guide me. And then we'd open up the Bible and we'd almost, I know some of you have told me this, but it's kind of funny. You like close your eyes almost, and maybe you wouldn't actually close your eyes, but you feel like you're just going, and you just hope that whatever's under your finger is from God. But I knew a lot of people like that very mysterious sense of God's going to direct you. Like, this verse is for you today. And that experience that he's given you your verse, not just like a life verse, but he's given you a verse for this day and even this hour. It kind of strengthens that conviction in your heart that God is actively involved in sending you messages from the other side. You're being personally addressed. The higher power that's so transcendent is also immanent, and he is personally looking at you, watching you. It's comforting, it's awe-inspiring, and it just continues to deepen that connection. The personal guidance is another part of it. Just this idea, I was thinking through that God is guiding you to a job. He's guiding you to, go to this place for vacation and not that place. And every decision, every event becomes part of this divine plan where you kind of see it as like God is orchestrating these little things for you today, but he's orchestrating these days as part of your week and as part of your month, as part of your year, as part of your life. But he's got this grand plan. And there were endless discussions I heard preachers talk about where it's like, God has a will for your life, but you can kind of mess it up. So it's like there's like plan A that's gold, and there's plan B that's like silver, and then there's plan B that's bronze. Like, if you're just like totally disobeying God, but he's got this plan where he's going to take all of your mess and your chaos and still make it nice in the end. But if you can just stay on the straight and narrow and really, really do it God's way, you're going to get the gold. And which I guess is appropriate since we're all watching the Olympics these days. But either way, you see these decisions, these events, as God narrating your life. He's the narrator, but he's not just the passive narrator. He's the active narrator. He's the writer. He's the central figure who is directing your life, and he has a real intention to take you from point A to point B, and he'll get you there, and it'll be good. And you look back and say, "Thank you, God." And you take a particular job or you pursue a specific relationship, marriage, believing God is directing your steps. And it's weird to see too how people figure out what is God's will in that. I remember it was interesting at Bible college. I went to Bob Jones for a year, and then I finished at Lancaster Bible College. But at Bob Jones, I had this one roommate, and he specifically looked at God directing his steps toward a future spouse based purely on whether she was a good co-worker in ministry. Like if he was going to become a pastor or a missionary, she needed to be a really good pastor's wife or a missionary's wife. And I remember asking him at one point, like, do you bring into that equation at all, like just the pure physical, like I just really am attracted to her? And he said, absolutely not. Like, I intentionally try to go apart from that. Like, I try to just say, what is our spiritual connection and our ministry connection like? And I forget if I actually said this to him or if I just thought it, but it crossed my mind, the idea that if you married a girl based on her ministry ability, and she never realized it, like it never crossed her mind, she just assumed, you always thought you were just so beautiful. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and I want to spend my life with you. And someday you have that conversation, and she realizes, like, holy smokes, you picked me because I was a good partner in ministry, but you don't actually find me attractive. And if you dig in, you might even find that he has certain preferences. He's like, I prefer a different body type. I prefer a different hair color. Like, so why did you marry me? I married you because I felt God was ordaining it. He was bringing us together in ministry. It definitely made some wheels turn in my mind at that time. Anyway, I digress. But that sense of divine guidance, it provides a narrative, and every decision is part of a larger plan. God is ordaining. He's foreordaining things. He's sovereign. He's in control. And it reassures you. It gives you the sense of purpose and direction. And if it makes it feel like life's challenges of like, oh, the stress and the angst, it's like, which way do I go? It's like, no, it's a lot less fearful, less daunting. God's got you. God's got you. And so it just digs it deeper. A lot of people too, myself included, we reinterpreted life events as divine intervention. So even whether they're good or bad, they're part of his sovereign plan. So if you survived a car accident, it's a miracle. It's a sign. God has a special purpose for you. Um, there is this, all these interpretations. God gave you this job. No, he didn't. You got the position and then you lost it. He didn't give you a raise. It's all these little things. He's orchestrating it. And there begins to be a framework for you where every moment eventually has a meaning and a purpose that's clearly divine. And so anything, especially big like surviving a car accident, is that sense of God is right there controlling it. He's imminent. You don't have to think of him as distant. A lot of us thought of any moments of happiness and joy and fulfillment as attributable to God's blessings. The Bible does say, if you obey me, I'll bless you. If you don't obey me, I'll curse you. But the blessings part of it can be pretty cool, pretty sick, as we say. He really is going to bless you. He's going to, fill your barns up, and you'll have all these children, the blessings of the fruit of the land and of the womb, breast in the womb, and a few farms. You're going to have so much. And so whenever you have success in your life, you further reinforce this idea God is present and he's rewarding your faithfulness. And it provides this positive feedback loop where the more you believe and obey, the more you think and perceive that God is favoring you. And so you're going to credit your academic success or a good relationship or your work, doing great at work. You get a reward. Anything, that inner peace that might come that's just purely human society congratulating each other and liking each other, you're going to attribute that to the obedience to God and feeling like God is favoring you and he's taking care of you. And this is part of his plan. And it feels pretty good. And I think a lot of it goes back to our childhood where we're so driven to get our parents' positive feedback. Like, mommy, do you like my drawing? Yes, I do, sweet. It's so beautiful. You're such an artist. Oh, good. You put that little 2-year-old, 3-year-old smile on your face. I guess I'm a good artist. And it continues to you attribute all this and strengthen your faith as you reinforce this idea. God is real. He's impacting my life. He's present and he's there. And you just, like I said, the matrix code, you just feel like, oh, I can sense him. You also, it goes both ways to where you sense even the bad stuff. Like, let's say you have a rough day. You're like, I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted, or I feel depressed today. Oh, that's God. He's telling you, he's sending you a message. I want you to slow down. Hear my still quiet voice. You're chewing too much. Everything is God. There are a lot of emotional and psychological mechanisms at play in that. There's this first one that I would mention here is the power that belief and expectation can put in your mind. These wheels start moving of the confirmation bias and like a selective perception. Believers are going to focus on experiences and events that confirm their belief in God, and they're going to filter out the stuff that doesn't fit that. They're going to ignore it or rationalize it if it contradicts it. So the selective perception, and again, this feedback loop reinforces the sense God is real. And over time, it becomes so real to you and so deeply ingrained in your psyche, in your experience, that you just feel like my belief in God is completely, firmly, built on the idea that I know that I've sensed it. I've tasted and seen that the Lord is good. And so you can tell me all you want about comparative mythology. You can tell me all you want about Greco-Roman mystery cults. You can tell me about canon issues in early church history. I have tasted God. I have seen him at work in my heart. It doesn't matter what you say. It's like if somebody's married and like you're really married and they're right there in the room next to you, and someone sends you a message and says your spouse isn't real. You're like, you're an idiot. She's right there. He's right there. I can see them. I can touch them. We were in the same bed last night. We had breakfast this morning. They're real. They're here. That's how real God becomes to you. And certainly with that confirmation bias and their selective perception, prayer is a big part of that. A prayer that seems to be answered is proof of God's existence. And of course, prayers that don't get answered, which a lot of them don't, you either forget about them or you kind of think, well, maybe God's testing me on my faith. He's making me wait, saying maybe. Or you just kind of say it's part of God's mysterious will. His ways are higher than my ways. All that blah, blah, blah stuff we go through. And you end up taking what you can that includes a cognitive bias, and it strengthens your perception that God is actively talking to you, watching you, responding to your prayers and your needs. But that emotional satisfaction to say, I have seen prayers answered. And especially if you attribute miracles to that one way or another, Like, I have seen the hand of God in my life. I was very sick and now I'm better. And especially if you can attribute something major, like my aunt so-and-so had cancer and we all prayed for her. A month later, the doctor said she was clean as a whistle. Wow. What an amazing God we serve. Our God is an awesome God. At that point, you're so deep in this cesspool of cognitive dissonance that you can make your belief in God's involvement and his reality pretty much indisputable. Like, you can't undo that. You're so far gone. I mean, you can't, in the sense that at that point, obviously there's life events and things you can learn that eventually change it. But at that point, you're deep, you're neck deep. A lot of people end up bringing in something where, let's call it ambiguity or randomness, but they'll call things divine appointments. So let's say that you have this old friend from high school. You haven't seen this person in years, and you bump into them, and they're not really saved, but you know, or they're not walking with God or something. You walk in there, you bump into them, and you're like, I shared my life and I shared how God is working in my life, and it changed them. They either got saved or they got more serious about the Lord. They told me, hey, running into you was like a godsend. I feel so more alive than ever. It's like, oh, God orchestrated this appointment. God was taking the smallest details to make sure that he and I both walked into the grocery store at the same time on the same day. What are the odds? What are the odds? And so this sense of order and purpose, it makes the randomness of life feel less scary, less chaotic, and certainly more manageable and approachable and all the above. When you add to that stuff like what we do in church with what you might call, psychological conditioning, emotional conditioning, reinforcing your beliefs through rituals, our rituals of baptism, and of course that's usually just once, but the Lord's table, worship, Bible study, prayer, you're conditioning yourself to think that certain behaviors are connected with a deeper time of intimacy with God. So like, I go to my work and God's kind of there, but it's not like we're hanging out as close buddies. I'm not really worshiping him. I'm working on my Excel spreadsheet. But when you go into prayer and worship, it's like, this is where we meet God. This is the temple. Like, and we know the New Testament talks about your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. He's inside of you. And you feel that, like, I can almost feel him inside of me. And it's especially powerful when, and those emotions get so strong when you're doing these rituals. The repetition of them creates a bond, and it makes God feel constant and pervasive. And so eventually, again, matrix code, you see them everywhere. Singing worship songs is a big deal. That love and devotion that we weave into the lyrics, it creates those emotional experiences that, again, are like an encounter with God. And the communal aspect, the fact that there's 100, 200, 500, 1,000 people around us all singing these songs, or we go to YouTube and we bring up some worship songs there, and you see often those videos are of like whole groups of 20, 30, 40, 50 people, or a whole church. You almost feel like you're part of it. And even as much as YouTube is, it's just you looking at a screen, you can almost feel like you do when you're in a church. You can feel like you're part of it. And it becomes part of your active worship to God, your sacrifice to him. And when you share the emotions though with others, it amplifies that sense that God's like, I sense he's real to you. Oh, you do too. You do too. Oh, we all do. Wow. Hundreds of us are sensing God right now. It must be real. So it creates a community validation effect where you look around you, everyone's having these experiences, and it makes your doubt a lot less likely. Like, if I'm looking at hundreds of people and we're all experiencing God, and I'm the only one who's going to say maybe this isn't God, you're the oddball out in the room. And so, especially when you get into things like tears in church, raising your hands, moving, swaying, you're validating your experience. You're solidifying it. God is there. God is present. And one of the things that I think happens too for a lot of us is that, and by the way, I'm almost done some of my notes here. I wanted to just mention for the comments, if you don't mind, and I'm not actively monitoring them at the moment, but if you have anything you would want to add to this, I'd love to read off some comments in a couple minutes, just saying, how did you feel like God was real to you? How did you deal with it when you realized it wasn't? It's like, what were the things that motivated you to just dig deeper into this? And what were what would you say were things that helped you overcome any doubts and just sense he's really there. But I was going to mention a few more things before we wrap this part up. A lot of us almost create a mental image of God, which I know we're not really supposed to, because you're not supposed to like worship an idol. And it was a big deal for even a lot of churches I knew, like, don't have an image of Yahweh, of course, but maybe you don't even have an image of Jesus. I had this pastor years ago who would not watch a movie like The Passion of the Christ, which I personally thought was awesome at that time. But he wouldn't watch it because he said that will give you a mental image of what Jesus was, of what his suffering was, of what he went through, what he looked like, what his emotions and even his physical body, his blood, his scars. You're going to put that in your head like, that's my Jesus. It's like, that's whatever, Jim Caviezel, that's the actor. You don't want to make Jim Jesus. You want to not have an image. But at the same time, despite that strong emphasis that a lot of us grew up with, we still sort of anthropomorphize this God. We create mental images or concepts of God, and for sure of Jesus, and we sort of interact with them in our minds in prayer and in worship, and they become very vivid to us. They almost become like real entities, as it were. And the more detailed and personalized that those images are to you, the more real they become. And especially like if you truly do, like you remember that classic picture of Jesus. Of course, most of them are always white guys, but that classic one that was around in Bibles for hundreds of years, I forget where it started, but that was in my mind. I'd see it on the wall of the church. I'd see it in the Bible. That was Jesus to me. And it becomes more real. You think of him as that. You might visualize Jesus in different ways, such as he's the guy next to you. Remember the little demons, angel and demon still on your shoulder, do the bad thing. No, don't. Well, maybe Jesus is kind of like, he's a bigger deal than the little angels and demons on your shoulder, but he's like your right-hand man. He's like, he's right here. He's right here. Like, hey, I'm here if you need me. Jesus, take the wheel. Okay. I'm right here. I'll take the wheel for you. And when you visualize Jesus that way, is even if you don't visualize what he physically looks like, he's in the room with me. It makes it feel tangible and deeply personal. And some people get kind of really big into the woo-woo side of it. Like, I just sense it. Like, every little extra weird noise, almost like a haunted house. It's like, it becomes like there's spiritual noises happening here. And it's not, it's just the world around you, but people connect things in weird ways. I've seen it, I've heard it, and it becomes, again, just as strong, if not stronger, than real life and real people. So the ability to personalize God and Jesus, you see them as your friend, your father, your protector. It continues to make it more intimate, more real. And those personalized roles, they make God and Jesus seem very accessible, relatable, close to us. His proximity means the world to us, and we deepen that emotional connection. I think, too, sometimes the words we use, such as Father and friend, dear Heavenly Father, please this, please that, our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Jesus is your friend. He's your brother, like Hebrews says. You have these key words that reinforce your sense of a personal, close relationship, similar to the relationship you have with your earthly family. It helps bridge that abstract gap, the abstract concept of divinity that's somewhere out there in the ether. No, this God is here. He's immanent. He's present. He's interacting with your everyday experience of human life. Sometimes people will do imaginative prayer practices where they might start with biblical scenes. And I forget if I've really, done this much. You have to pardon my cough. I had bronchitis about 6 weeks ago, and I've got asthma, and it went deep in my chest, and every once in a while it kind of comes back and kicks my butt a little bit. But anyway, you imagine Adam and Eve walking in the Garden of Eden, right? In the cool of the day. Maybe you hear an old hymn that talks about him. I walk with him and I talk with him and so forth. And you get that sense that I like to imagine myself back in the garden. What was it like to walk with God in the garden? What would it have been like to walk with Jesus on the road to Emmaus? And you begin to blur your imagination and reality. And you have this mental image of you're walking with Jesus. Maybe it's even locally, like it's right in my backyard, but he's right here with me in my garden. We have a personal spot. It's the park. My park time is my time with Jesus. And that mental image makes it feel like an actual encounter. And they can be very, very, very emotionally satisfying. Again, they reinforce the belief this God is real. And eventually someone like me who comes along and says, can we talk about comparative mythology? Those people are like it doesn't really matter. I know that I know that I know that he's real. I've sensed him. The impact of repetition is a big deal. I talked a little bit about like the Lord's table and just, prayer, worship, but we're basically going through these rituals and we're repeatedly doing them and we're rehearsing them as it were. And it creates sort of a rhythm. And I don't know quite how to say it too much better, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to explain this part of it. But when you have prayer, you feel like God's close. But when you get into a prayer routine, and when you go to church once, but then you go to church on a regular basis, you're attending weekly, maybe a couple times a week, go on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. You've got this rhythm where your life is oriented around the presence of God. So you have this structure and schedule, and it again deepens that sense of God's reality. It becomes a core part of who you are, your experience. It's predictable, it's a structure, and it just again reinforces everything. And when you're rehearsing your beliefs, you're saying, the preacher's telling you stuff that you've heard before, and you're going through verses again and again and again, and the songs you sing are the same songs again and again and again. Repetition is a big part of indoctrination, and you're rehearsing your beliefs about God's power, his presence, his love, his character, salvation, because you're reciting scripture over and over, the same ones. You're singing hymns over and over, the same ones. You're maybe saying the Lord's Prayer over and over, the same ones. You're saying, maybe some churches are going through doctrinal statements and things like that. And maybe Westminster Confession, or if you're doing things at home as a child, maybe the Shorter Catechism for kids or something. You're going through repetition, and that just entrenches the beliefs, of course, but it also makes it unshakably real. The more you repeat these one-offs, and they're no longer one-offs, it's like, I sensed God at this one single event 6 months ago. No, I sense God 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times a week. Again, it becomes very ingrained in your psyche. And people do repeat, again, the creeds and the Lord's Prayer, things like that. So I'm going to, in 1 second, go to the comments, because I want to, again, understand why some of you would, what you would add to it, why you felt like it was so real. But I do just want to kind of wrap up my part of this here by saying, I understand that when you do finally deconvert, it really hurts. I mean, there's such an emotional impact. It's the shock. God's not there. You've lost everything. You feel abandoned, perhaps by your family or something, if you've told them, but you feel abandoned. This God felt so real to you. And I remember thinking to myself, when I deconverted, my dad had died in January of 2019, and I deconverted at the end of September 2019. And I'll be honest, my deconversion was a bigger funeral for my father, Heavenly Father, than my earthly father's funeral was. It hurts so much more, and it should. If you really believe you have your earthly daddy for like this long, and your heavenly daddy's like forever, like you can't even stretch your arms far enough apart to picture it, he is so much more important. When you realize he's not there, it's devastating. It's a collapse of a relationship that you felt like you had. It's a divorce that's greater than any divorce you could go through in life. And I don't think people realize that. I don't think Christians, I've said this before too, if you were to have a funeral, like let's say I'd gone to my dad's funeral in January of 2019, and I did, but let's say somebody came up to me and said, just being obnoxious or something, somebody's drunk or something, like, dude, what are you fussing about? Why are you so sad? It's just your dad's gone. Let it go. It's no big deal. You'd be like, what is your problem? I'm grieving. Let me have a day of grief here. And of course, no one really does that. People are very respectful of most people's grief. But if someone had done that, come up to you and said, what's your deal? Why are you grieving this? It's no big deal. It's just your daddy. It'd be so obnoxious, so wrong. And yet when you say to a Christian, I am grieving the loss of my Heavenly Father, they're like, you're a freaking idiot and a fool. And what are you talking about? And they're so in your face. They're so rude, and they don't let you grieve. You have to grieve this. This character was real, if not more real than the real people in your life. We deal with betrayal and anger at that point. anger at ourselves for believing it, anger at religious leaders for perpetuating the myth and the stories, the idea, the concept that he's real and he's not. And that anger can be overwhelming. And some of us have an existential crisis. We're like, is there meaning in life anymore? If I don't have God, I am so alone. And to realize, like, when you kind of backdate it, you're like, oh my gosh, I've been alone all this time. Like, this is really crazy. All those times I was praying, God, we're going on a trip tomorrow. Please give us a hedge of protection around our car and blah, blah, blah. Keep us safe. He was never there. This has just been a big void, and it's going to be terrifying. You feel a bit like you're adrift. Maybe your moral or existential anchor is gone. It's a crisis of meaning. Nihilism can sometimes come in. Depression can come in. Your identity, you kind of, because your identity was intertwined with your faith and with this character. You felt like it wasn't just like he's there. It's like he's there, but we're connected. He's in my heart, and my body's the temple of the Holy Spirit. Like, the Spirit's in me. Because it's woven so much into your identity, it's like you have to go through a process of self redefinition. You're dismantling yourself and recreating yourself. Intense feelings of loss. And so after this collapse, and you're coming to terms with the illusion of it all, you're accepting reality. Eventually, the journey switches from doubt, sorrow. You're working through the layers. You're understanding the mechanisms of how this happened, figuring out the psychology behind it, and you become empowered. You get more knowledge. You reclaim your sense of agency, and you're moving forward, of course, with this self-awareness. It does start to give a little bit of closure. You understand the rational explanation for what happened, for what used to seem supernatural. You're exploring cognitive biases. You're exploring conditioning, the way that the church indoctrinated you, even your parents. The idea of emotional conditioning, the way that your imagination and your imaginative prayer, how did that create this illusion? And as you begin to understand it more, and you sort of do a post-mortem on what this does what this did to your mind, you realize, okay, I see how I got snowballed into this thing from a very young age, and it's time I can explore new ideas. I can reclaim my identity. I can become strong again. I don't find my strength in God anymore. I can build human connections and find fulfillment there, build my community, perhaps rebuild it. And, this journey is hard. And I just want to, again, wrap this part up by saying, I know it's hard and I'm sorry. I know some of you that maybe are new to this are really going through it, where it's just like, holy smokes, this hurts. This is akin to losing a friend, a father, a spouse. It is a void. It is a big void. And for people that just like, so you woke up, so you realized God wasn't real. You never had him anyway. No biggie. No, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And the idea of restarting at this point, and for some of you, it's been decades. You were decades talking to this character. You realize now you were talking to yourself, talking to the walls, talking to the ceiling. Wow. It's like you're awakening to a whole new life, but you're also grieving the life and the loss of time. So I do just want to encourage you on your self-discovery, on your new life, on your authenticity, on your taking your life back. So anyway, that was what was on my heart to share. I'm going to go, if I could, to the chat. And it looks like there's not as many chats as there were this morning, which is probably, I would assume, attributed to the fact that it's Saturday afternoon and some people are out and about and having fun, which is great. Hopefully some people will catch this later. Accidentally Agnostic says hello from Michigan. Anne-Marie, greetings from Michigan. Accidentally Agnostic from Michigan. Anne-Marie from Michigan. Okay, 2 Michigans. I did get that right. Marsha from Florida. See here, Andy Astoria, happy to make a live. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate so much you're joining us today. John Johnson, brain fart when you realize Yahweh isn't God. Mind blown. Yeah, for sure. And you realize he was originally a demigod, a son of Elyon or Adonai or whatever it is. Anne-Marie says the God of the Old Testament is a bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser. Yeah, and it's interesting how much we loved this character. We loved him. He was our father. Aeon, I don't have an opinion on Mark 14:51 at the moment. I did have an interview with, I forget if it was you that asked the question or someone else, but the question did get asked in an earlier live stream about Jesus with the young boy. My Ammon Hillman interview was interesting. I don't necessarily have an opinion yet on what I think about it, but I think Ammon Hillman's got some interesting thoughts to at least propose. It's above my pay grade to say what I think about that. Carol Bingham, hi Tim, I'm absolutely terrified of death. Just in case God throws me into hell, I keep forcing my breath in, seeing how long I can hold it, in case Yahweh takes it and I end up in outer darkness. Wow. Carol, I feel so bad for that. I have another friend that emails me on a very regular basis and says some very similar things. He's dealing with that too. And talks about, demons. He thinks he sees evidence that demons are at work, and if demons are real, then hell is real to him. I can't say enough probably in just a minute here to make a difference, but I will just say, keep on studying where the idea of hell came from. The ancient Jews did not believe in hell. They believed in Sheol, a place of the dead. It evolved over time, especially as they got exposed to Babylonian influence, the Zoroastrians, as well as the Greco-Roman, Greeks at that point, but the Greek gods. They brought in all this stuff with the afterlife, and eventually it got woven into Judaism. I think that case has been made by a lot of people really well. But being terrified of death is a horrible thing, because you literally could have that for your whole life, and you'll if you do have one life, then you're literally spending your whole life waiting for it to end. You're never really starting it, and it will suffocate you. That's one of the poisons of Christianity, is it suffocates your ability to live in the here and now and enjoy it, because you're constantly focused on death. Whether it's because God wants to take you there soon, or you don't know when, but you're thinking about what it's going to be like when I get there. Is God going to be proud of me? Did I do enough, good and faithful servant kind of stuff? Wanting to see loved ones that have gone before. Just the whole idea that everything that you want, heaven, Jesus, glories of rewards and all that, seeing the angels, everything is over that threshold, the other side of that threshold, when you die. And Christianity is in several ways a death cult. And one of them is that it makes you feel like your life is up ahead. Your life starts someday. This is like temporary. This is like practice run almost, but your real life starts later. And it's just not true. Your real life does not start later. It starts now. I wish you the best on your journey. That's some very hard stuff. I will admit, just being honest, I did not struggle with that. I had studied the mythology part of it so deep for so long that when I escaped, it was that hour. I was like completely out. Everything was gone in an hour. Every fear, every sense of maybe I should keep praying, maybe the devil's got me, I was just gone. I was like, this is all garbage, all of it. John Johnson again says it's all psychological. We really felt it. It was a lie the entire time. Mind F all of it. Casey says, I had these experiences in worship singing, but also listening to a band called Tool, but Christians would not acknowledge the latter. Yeah. Worship times can be so manipulative to, it's not just the church is doing it to us. We do it to ourselves, but that environment really creates those feelings. Donovan says, I too thought those feelings were an anomaly. Then I realized I got those same feelings by hearing Joan Sutherland and Luciano Pavarotti sing. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, there's all kinds of songs I've had that take me to a higher plane. They really do. John Johnson, never before did I feel free or no fear until I left religion. Now it's free with no fear every day. Go figure. Danny from the blockchain, reality is what was happening while we were in church. Yeah, exactly. We were stuck in Fantasyland. Let's see here. Donovan, it's been just over a month for me. I'm getting there. Yeah, it'll take a while. But to just take it one step at a time, and we're certainly care about you, and so glad that you're moving forward in your journey. I wish you the best with that. Let's see here. Miss I says to John, do you think a little bit of fear will return when you end up on your deathbed? I'm going to just, for the sake of time, I'm going to skim. I don't know if you all got a chance to answer that, but if someone were to ask me that, like, would I be afraid of my deathbed? No. There's just no way that Yahweh is real. There's just simply no way that Yahweh is real. Now, is it possible there's something else? Of course. That's the agnostic part of us. We don't know everything. We know almost nothing about almost everything. But the idea that the God of the Bible is real, and that outcome, what they describe as the afterlife and judgment, is that real? There's no way. That is, if you study comparative mythology enough, that is very clear. There's no way that the Bible is reality. Carol says again, it was a tapping sound inside God's voice, and I couldn't move until the tapping stopped. That's interesting. I don't quite know if I understand how that happens, what you were hearing, but that is fascinating. And I certainly, again, my heart goes out to you for what you were going through. I'll have to think on that. I'll come back to you on that at a later date, but that's fascinating. I'm very sorry for your heartache through this. Anne Marie says, I've been out of religion for about 13 years. It only gets easier each day. Being released from being a slave is the best experience. Yeah, well said. Praise the Lord. John Johnson, we're all victims of generational ignorance. Every generation gets more ignorant until we have what we have today. We live in the age of information. Use it to to educate yourselves. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. John Johnson, the thousands of near-death experience videos I've watched show me you simply leave your meat locker body and go to the spirit realm where you'll find peace and love beyond all understanding. I don't put any stock myself in near-death experiences. No offense to anyone that does, but I don't think we go anywhere. I think it's just like before we were born. So I'm not afraid of it, and I don't want it though. Anyone that watches my channel more than a week or two knows I really wanted to live forever, and I still do, and I want to live as long as I can. And when you have little kids that need you and rely on you, that really becomes a pressing part of your concern. You want to live for them, if only just to be their guiding light and their supporting hand. Let's see here. I'm going to skip through a few real quick. Looks like you all went back and forth on a couple quick topics. Day of the Jackal, I need to turn on notifications for this channel. I had no idea we were getting 2 streams today. I'm sorry, Day of the Jackal. Of course, you can always watch the repeat, whenever it's done being looped through YouTube. I don't think it takes that long. It's usually pretty quick. If you've seen, the second half, you can certainly chime in for the first half again and watch it. But yeah, I'm trying to, like, whenever I am I'm currently in a temporary orders of the custody battle. When I don't have the kids with me, I'm going to just try my best to be pretty much working 16-hour days. So gotta make the donuts. Donovan says, I've been praying one particular prayer for 40 years and never up to date have gotten an answer for it. Yeah, that's hard. I had some similar things I could ditto on that. It's very hard. But yeah, we were deceived. John Johnson says we were all lied to, all of us. Yeah, well said. See here. Somebody says, I think we're getting 3 episodes today. Yeah. For anyone that's still with me, that's still listening to me read the comments and kind of commenting back, unless something happens like a computer crash or something, hopefully not. I'm doing an open mic tonight at 7. I don't have a particular topic. I'm just basically going to say, come on your video and talk for 3 to 5 minutes and share something on your heart. Obviously, it's not a free-for-all. I'm not going to have Christians come on and say, hey, I'd like to reconvert you to, they're going to get booted out in 10 seconds. But, anyone that's safe, anyone that's not here to be rude or obnoxious, come on for 3 to 5 minutes and just share what's on your heart. So I'm going to do that tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm pretty sure I've already got that link up. You should be able to go to my YouTube channel, go to the live section and see it there. Let's see here. John Johnson says, any human standard or labeling of God. I'm 100% atheist. Those gods are a freaking lie, all of them. Yeah, I would agree 100%. H says, I grew up Catholic. I was never fully committed, but in the past year, I'm starting to think that there is no God and no higher power. Still working through it. Best wishes with your journey. It's your journey. No, there's no right and wrong answer. You land wherever you feel best. Absolutely. Just going through a little bit quicker here. I want to make sure I keep this at an hour or less. Day of the Jackal. I think some people feel a sense of divinity or connectedness or something I don't have the word for. And that is where this spiritual yearning comes from. Yeah, I would agree. When you're looking up at the stars at night, when you're out on a mountain by yourself or walking your dog, you can feel real spiritual. I don't think that's anything more than chemicals in your brain. We're basically just highly evolved math. We're highly evolved animals. And I don't think that what we experience as spiritual is actually spiritual, but it feels spiritual. And we've come to a point where we can't ignore it. If you ignore that spiritual part of you, it's evolved to the point where if you just act like you're nothing but a piece of meat and nothing else, you're going to feel pretty shallow. But I like to think of it too as more the poetic side of it. It's not as much spiritual for me, but poetic. If you can't look at a sunrise and a sunset and then you have your breath taken away and think, I'm part of something big and beautiful, and it does impact me, and I feel like it does take my breath away wow, or the beauty of your children. To me, it's not spiritual, but the poet part of me comes out, and I think that makes you a good, it makes your experience so much better. It makes you real, and to experience too the pain, like the pain of the reality of life is short, life is too short, it's full of pain, and maybe some generation someday will have a different experience as the advances happen, but at this point, life is very painful for a lot of people, and to be able to experience both the beauty and the pain, and create some kind of narrative out of it with poetry or song or something like that, makes a difference. Mankind was created the moment he created gods, and vice versa. Yeah, funny. Richard says, the Bible is basically just a storybook and should be treated as such. The Bible is written by mostly male authors. Surprise, surprise, God is a he. Yeah, well said. According to the fairy tale book called the Bible, Jesus said he will return. I'm still waiting. Yeah, exactly. Everyone waiting will be waiting for a long time. Let's see here. Guitar Dog says, I'm fine with a pantheistic God, but the God of the Bible fails my standards for quote unquote God. Yeah. And I think the definition is a big piece of this. That's a great point. If we were to say, well, the God of the Bible is not real, Jesus isn't real, but there might be a God out there. Well, what's your definition for God at that point? Is it a super advanced alien species? Is it a species that's in a different universe? The fact that they're in a different universe and that they somehow found a way to, create our universe from their universe, but they didn't create their original universe. Is that a God? I don't know. It's just there's some ways in which, and what if God were transcendent but not immanent? What if he was like a deist God, where he's so powerful but he doesn't talk to you, and he's never going to be down on your level. He doesn't have a salvation. Is that a God? Christians, John Johnson says, Christians don't realize what Christianity says the Bible is saying is a lie. When you comprehend what I'm saying, you'll have more freedom. Yeah, exactly. And they can't. That's part of, I guess, what I'm saying when I say Jesus felt real to us, and Yahweh did too. It's hard for them to believe this is a lie when they can say, I've seen it. I felt him. There's just no way this is. It's like saying, anyone that's real in your life isn't real. Like I just spent the day with them. I just ate lunch with them. I know they're real. Fiery Unbeliever, thank you so much for joining us. So good to see you a second time today. Hi, Tim. When I was little, my parents told me that when I was afraid of monsters in the dark, they were actually demons. The solution was for me to pray so that they would not possess me or hurt me. Yeah. And that'll make not just God and Jesus real, but the demons and Satan real. That's a good point. The whole demonic spiritual world becomes more real. And certainly things like the Frank Peretti books, This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness. If you believe that stuff and you listen to preachers and things like that espouse that, yeah, the whole thing becomes very real. And every time there's a shadow that passes, and you're like, what created that shadow? Anything. It really makes it cranks up to a whole new level. And Fire Unbeliever again, that's how my relationship with God began. Yeah, it's very sad. Casey Hendricks, when my family and friends started rallying around Trump, it put a splinter in my mind. Then started questioning why my church was so different from other churches. Yeah, Trump and COVID made such a wonderful difference to people leaving Christianity. I mean, obviously, both of them were very bad news for our planet, and I'm not rejoicing in the fact that they were able to do what they did. COVID obviously was horrible, and Trump obviously was horrible, in my opinion. But they both, in terms of the question of did they impact Christianity in this country, yeah, they messed with it in some major ways that much more powerfully than an atheist YouTube channel could ever do. Let's see here. Reading through these real quick. Anne Marie says, why anyone in this day and age would believe in a book with talking animals, a floating zoo, and living inside a whale is beyond me. Yeah. And if they could just understand the metaphors and the star stories, a lot of that would change too. Allegories. Fire Unbeliever, realizing that demons do not exist is such a relief. Yeah, agreed. I didn't focus on demons quite as much as it sounds like you maybe did, but I still believed in them. And the Frank Peretti books really kind of put the fear of them in my heart for a while. But again, for me personally, and I'm not bragging and saying this, just telling my story. When I deconverted that hour, all of it was gone, like all of it. The only residual things were really left was the pain that I wasn't going to go to heaven. But the fear of demons, praying to God, hoping for guardian angels to watch me, it was like, it's all just made up. Might as well pray to Zeus and Dionysus. Shayna says, I would glory in the fact that Christianity was the only religion that has a God who calls himself Father. It was a guise of intimacy and made me feel loved. Yeah, Yeah, the father figure sense is really big. Huge. Thank you, Shannon, for joining us. Anne-Marie, some see those tall tales as literal. Yeah, they really do. Guitar Dog, Jesus had an important message to deliver. That's why he had such a short ministry and preached to the smallest group of people he could find. Then he floated away, never to be heard from again. Yeah. Crazy, crazy stuff. Let's see here. It looks like, again, some of you had went back and forth a little bit with some conversations, so I'm kind of skimming through that. Christian says, deconverting isn't easy at all. Agreed. I still struggle to go back to Christianity because I do miss the fellowship, but I can't believe the lies anymore. That always pulls me back to reality. Yeah, absolutely. And Kristen, I don't know if we've connected, but if you do ever feel like you want to share your story, please feel free to reach out to me on Facebook. I'm at Harmonic Tim. Anne-Marie says, if Jesus healed the blind man, why didn't he just heal all the blindnesses? Yeah, but that's a great question. Why just one man? Why? What about all the kids that died that day of starvation, a mile away? It's just crazy. They explain that away by saying God works in mysterious ways. Yeah. Casey says, I had a Baptist tell me miracles ceased to exist at Pentecost. My churches were pretty close to that, especially like they thought tongues were pretty much gone. Kristen says, identity was a big issue for me. It was always connected with Jesus. And now that I let him go, I'm still learning my identity. Yeah, it's such a journey. It's such a journey. You realize again, in the Matrix, like Neo, you've never used your eyes before. You lived your whole life and your eyes have been closed the whole time. It's a crazy journey. Let's see here. Steve says, Tim, have you noticed many churches use sexual metaphors about God, Jesus, and the church? Some mystics, like Saint Teresa of Avila, even say that Yahweh put her in pain that was so great that it made me moan. Yes, that's interesting, Steve. Thank you for that question. The exposure I had to it was ironically through John Michael Talbot. And he was a Roman Catholic monk. He's I think a Jesuit priest or something like that. But he is also a songwriter. And I think he was into creating songs before he became a monk. But he continued to use his musical talent to create unbelievably beautiful songs. And they were so beautiful that, even though he was Catholic, a lot of evangelicals and Protestants used his songs. And Michael Card, who was very evangelical, very Protestant, Michael Card and John Michael Talbot did a CD together called Brother to Brother, which really shook some people up. But John Michael Talbot's separate CDs that weren't together with Michael Card, he did one where he was taking the poetry of those mystics like you're talking about, and some of them are extremely, extremely erotic. He talks about one where he meets the Lord on a beach, and it's almost like the poet is putting himself in the sense of like a lover that's abandoning himself or herself to this random meetup. And they talk about meeting up on a beach and going into a cave and talk about he suspended all my senses. And like, yeah, wow, like you're using some really erotic metaphors here. That is fascinating. And I didn't talk about that earlier, but that's a really good point. When you think that God's giving you like an emotional orgasm, like I should say a spiritual orgasm of sorts, where it's like, yeah, it's not the throbbing of my body, but it's the throbbing of my soul, the throbbing of my spirit. It is sexual and it's orgasmic in some spiritual sense. That'll make God feel real. I never got that deep into it, thankfully. It's kind of weird stuff, but yeah, I could imagine the people that went down that path much further than the Gnostic version of it. When you bring Gnosticism and you bring eroticism together like that, like those mystics and those monks did, oh yeah, crazy stuff. That's crazy stuff. But interesting. I would say there was an appeal to me not to get into the erotic side of it, but to just really sense God's presence so deeply and profoundly that you almost could feel like not an emotional, like always in me in some sexual perverted sense, but just like he is really like, he's that close. He's touching me. And of course, when you look at the fact that it's Christ and his bride, the church, some of those metaphors become even more, more real. So Miss Big Up says nearly 7:40 p.m. in my part of the world. Wow. Okay. I'm guessing, is that Europe? Probably in Europe or South Africa. PG, I used to pray asking God to kill me before I lost all my faith. Isn't that crazy? I've heard something like that before, at least once. Yeah, that's very much typical. I remember hearing too a sermon where a preacher said, when I was little, my mom used to pray over me and she'd say, God, raise this little boy up to be a strong servant of yours. But God, if someday he's going to grow up and just profane your name directly or with his life in some way, God, just go ahead and take him now. She prayed that right over his bed at night. Like that'll mess with your head a little bit. T Yahoo says, remember, everything that you were taught and hearing about the afterlife came from people that were alive. Yeah, exactly. Guitar Dog says, love your channel. Appreciate what you do. Thank you so much, Guitar Dog. I really appreciate your donation. It means so much. Donovan has a donation as well for $20. Love and appreciate your channel, Tim. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Appreciate your donations more than ever. If you see my recent update on my situation with the custody battle and the child abuse and parental alienation, I appreciate every donation you all give. So thank you so much. It really means the world. Day of the Jackal says, Tim, when you say you studied the mythology part, do you mean the mythology of all the cultures in which Christianity existed? Yes and no. I would say I studied a lot of that. I was definitely much more restricted and filtered to which parts of the cultures in which Christianity existed, but which Christianity specifically adopted. So, for example, you might look at some of the cultures and say they did certain things with temple prostitution. And in saying that, I say watch the Ammon Hillman interview if you want to. There may have been some of that with Christianity. I'm not sure. But I personally doubt that early Christianity had much to do with temple prostitution at all. I think it was, Judaism wouldn't have really allowed that, most likely. So there was syncretism, of course, but that part of it isn't really that relevant. But if you say, well, all these other groups were looking at Plato and his philosophies. They were looking at the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. That was their Bible. They're looking at these Greco-Roman mystery cults, the demigods of that life. Those got woven into the Bible exponentially. And then when you look at Enoch, which got woven in exponentially in the New Testament, and you say, well, where did that originally come from before? And then where did the mythology behind Yahweh come from? There's all kinds of other mythologies that I would have to claim ignorance of for those other cultures, but I was looking specifically at what most likely was adopted and copied from those cultures into Christianity and Judaism. Let's see here. Messiah, thank you for your donation. I really appreciate that. There's something so emotional and real about being made to feel evil and then being absolved, redeemed, set free by the holiest supreme being to be in a relationship. Yeah. And that's a big deal too. When you feel that connection of, you're praying, you're worshiping, but you're not just praying to this God because he's supreme and he's almighty, but he has personally come down and interacted with you in a salvific sense. He has gone out of his way to put your name in the Lamb's Book of Life. He's gone out of his way to send his son to purchase you. Again, it adds so much more personal feelings to it all. And Messiah says, I cannot put Christianity and mythology in the same sentence. It's weird how Tim says that all the time. Interesting. Well, I would recommend, Messiah, and maybe you've done this already, I would highly recommend channels like Myth Vision. If you haven't seen Derek Lambert's channel, Myth Vision, if you haven't looked at things that are there with Dr. Dennis MacDonald from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and Virgil's Aeneid, if you haven't looked at Dr. Carrier's videos about the Greco-Roman mystery cults, once you get, there's a level that it's going to, if you haven't seen it yet, it's going to freak you out a little bit. But yeah, there's a whole level in which they copied like crazy. And if you haven't touched yet into Pythagoreanism and its influence on Christianity, and if you haven't touched on yet the Essenes, and you haven't touched yet on numerology, and you haven't touched yet on astrotheology, oh my goodness, there's a whole, it's time to take the red pill and see how deep this rabbit hole goes. There's a whole different levels upon levels. We're talking about Inception. This is a dream within a dream. They were on some crazy stuff, and they were doing some crazy stuff with those texts. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like, whoa, this isn't what I thought at all. So, see here. I'm just at an hour, a little over an hour, so I'm going to try to wrap this up faster. Miss I, thank you again for your donation. It feels real because 2.4 billion people agreed. That's a great point. I should have mentioned that. That's a fantastic point. You feel like it's real because there's just so many people, not just in your church, but around the planet. And over the years, over the centuries, over the millennia, it just feels like it's got to be real. And it's funny, that's again, a super point. Thanks for bringing that up. That was actually my very first question in my mind when I was deconverting. That, like, the day of it, I was deconverting for 3 or 4 years, but the day I deconverted, it was all in an hour. And the very first question that popped in my head, I was talking to myself, and I said, I don't think this is real. Is that even possible? And literally the next thought was, there's just no way. There's no way that many people have been deceived for that long. They would have picked up on the deception somewhere. There's just no way. And of course, you probably can guess what I was thinking. Well, wait a second. We thought the Muslims have been deceived for centuries. The Buddhists have been. The Hindus have been. Some of these religions are older even than Judaism and Christianity. And we think they're all garbage. They're all deceived. It's either self-deception or the devil, but it's the same outcome. It's like, wait a second. If they're all deceived, why couldn't we be deceived too? And within minutes of that, the plug on the drain came out, and bam, all kinds of stuff happened in my head. It was crazy. Andy Astoria, I remember begging God to make himself known to me. He never did, but that didn't stop me from going to Bible college and a short-term mission. Yeah. It's interesting. I can definitely relate to some of that. I felt the lack of God's intimate presence, and at times I felt like my theology overrode over that. Everything was like, don't worry about your experience, just get your theology straight. God will, as long as you focus on the truth, God will take care of everything else. But at times it hurt that I could feel like certain people, you just sense like when they're worshiping up front or something, like, I think you probably sense him. And I'm like, I'm obeying him, but I don't sense him in quite that intense way that you probably do. Yeah, it gets to you sometimes. You feel like you're on the outside looking in a little bit, even if you're completely, intense about it and intentional and legitimate. Just, if you don't feel it, you don't feel it. Day of the Jackal, it feels real because we were indoctrinated since birth to believe it was real, and all those other pagan religions are mythological, but Christianity is yet another story, legend, mythology. Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. And I'm going to skim here a little bit faster because I've, again, gone a little bit over an hour here. Thank you again so much for your comments. Fire and Believer, thank you so much for doing these lives and acknowledging the chat. It helps me feel like I have a friend who understands. Yeah, and I think about you and your situation so much, and I wish you so much good things to come. And I'm not out of the thicket yet myself by any stretch. So I wish you well, and I certainly am hoping good things for better days for myself. Miss I, thank you for your other donation. My mom is obsessed with the Passion Translation. I'm not familiar with the Passion Translation. I'm guessing that's translation of the Bible, but that's interesting. I will just say this, if I can make a quick comment on that. I definitely felt like there were certain translations that brought God alive to me. The Message was a little bit helpful. You felt kind of like, is this a little bit too heretical at times? Because he's kind of taking really big liberties with the text. But it was like, but you still got that sense of this is alive. And what I think I felt a lot too was not as much the specific translations of the Bible, but there were certain authors that just got me. C.S. Lewis, of course, got a lot of us, but there was one similar to C.S. Lewis. I think they were friends with him. Sheldon Van Auken, A Severe Mercy. If you're familiar with that book, A Severe Mercy. That book got me into a whole new level. And there are some other, The Divine Conspiracy. I think that theologian, I think he's passed, unfortunately, early in life, but he had several books like that. But The Divine Conspiracy, that book, that'll, if you've ever seen The Divine Conspiracy, I'll just say this real quick. That book is intense, and he writes at such a high level that you have to sometimes read the same sentence or paragraph like 3 or 4 times to just be like, I think I got what he just said. But when you get it, it's like, holy smokes, that is intense. And you feel like you're going to a new spiritual plane of your relationship with God just based on this book alone. Certain authors they just take you there. Just like you're thinking on a level that's so high. And if you can kind of track with them, you feel closer to God. You're like, oh my gosh, like you, the author, could not have said that unless you're really tracking with God. So the fact that you said it that way, you're shocking the hell out of my system and bringing me closer to God. That kind of stuff, that fired me up. I just love that stuff. Kristen, do you have an email I can reach out to? I would recommend Facebook. Yeah, Harmonic Tim. Some people reach out to me on the business side, Harmonic Atheist, but the actual email works a little differently on Facebook for business accounts. I prefer just my regular one. At Harmonic Tim, just add me as a friend. If it gives you any issues, do Harmonic Atheist, and that gives you issues, just my email is harmonicatheist@yahoo.com. And let's see here, just a few more. Miss Big Up says yes to Myth Vision. Yeah, Derek is the man. He's been in this for years. He's great. He's actually moving closer than, not quite close to me, but closer. He was on the West Coast. He's moving down to Florida. So I hit him up. I was like, dude, we're closer than we've ever been. Although I think he was in North Carolina before. So he was relatively close, but I'm like, if you're in Florida, you're close enough. Like I gotta meet you in person. He's been a big part of my journey too. Guy says, please, what's the deal with the Essenes? I will answer that another time. That's a whole project. Yeah, the Essenes are a big part of this, and I would recommend, if you are interested in that, start Googling stuff and YouTubing it. Let's see here. Steve says it's important that we understand the sexual aspect of all this. Some people really are sexually attracted to Yahweh in a sense. It's crazy what that worldview does to people. Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard people say it that way, although it's certainly possible that I've missed it, but I've never heard someone say they're sexually attracted to Yahweh or even to Jesus. I think it'd be easier to say I'm sexually attracted to Jesus because people see him more in a movie or a book. Like I can see, he's this muscular dude. I could see people being attracted to that. I've never heard it with Yahweh, but I think there are some weird things that people do with their theology. Yeah. And across the board, it's like any other topic. Once you open your eyes and you realize that stuff simply has nothing to do with reality. No matter whether you go in some weird sense where you're Gnostic or you're esoteric or you're more sexual about your relationship with God, whatever it is, like it's all just, you got to start over. You got to get that slate clean if you can. Donovan says, now we know why we must come to Christianity as a child. Only a child can believe all that. The brainwashing has to start very early to take roots. Yeah, in many ways it does. And it's interesting you said that, because I'm actually about to create a link for another live stream where I specifically talk about the fact that I think in many ways Christians are stuck in childhood. They really are. They're stuck in the mind of a child. And that's very, very astute. Very, very astute. It's when you really dig deep into what, if you were to ignore religion and just say, how does a child think and how do they migrate to adulthood? What are the stages of maturity? You see, when you look specifically, even take that structure and impose it over Christian beliefs, you realize they're stuck in early childhood. It's very fascinating. I look forward to digging into that at some point soon. Day of the Jackal, you're currently the last comment, so we'll wrap up here. Did anyone, one more just popped in. Did anyone here ever watch that 90s movie, The Seventh Sign? That movie mesmerized me as a kid. I couldn't get enough of the Book of Revelation after that. I personally do not remember seeing that, but I do remember some movies that would fall probably in that category, End Times or Rapture or something like that. And yeah, there was a part of me that got mesmerized by it. I was really mesmerized by the Passion of the Christ. I was a Christian still at that point. And I literally at some point, I remember saying to myself, you should probably watch that like every week just to keep it fresh in your mind and right in your mind's eye what your Lord and Savior had to endure for you. You need to keep the gospel and the actual suffering, the passion right there. And you can't forget it. You can't forget the blood. You can't forget the stripes. You can't forget the beating, the crown of thorns, the cross. And for a while, I was committed to I'm going to watch this movie once a week for the rest of my life. I never want to forget what great things God has done for us, how great a salvation he's purchased for us. Casey, I was listening to an episode of The Line, I believe, and some guy said he has sex with Jesus. Okay. Yeah, that's a little bit weird. Let's see here. Day of the Jackal. Wow, you just hit the nail on the head with stuck in the mind of a child. Yeah. I think there's a lot to that, and I look forward to digging into that shortly. So anyway, just want to say thank you so much again to all of you who came to support the channel. Thank you for those who were able to give some donations. I really, really appreciate that. Again, in light of what I'm going through, it means the world to me. For anyone that does want to at some point come on, please keep an eye on the live streams. I'm trying to make it more obvious as I get towards that, probably within the next week, as to which ones are going to be like me just reading and then reading your comments versus me inviting people on. One of them, again, that is going to be very clear, the Deconversion Poetry Slam, currently scheduled for Saturday the 24th, 7 p.m. Eastern. That's obviously going to be people coming on and sharing their stories. But I would love for people to begin to start to think of this channel as a place where it's kind of it's becoming two different tracks, as it were. One of them is the regular interviews that are pre-recorded and edited and can be posted. But then in addition, after that, there are going to be these live streams where, for some reason, I missed Andy's gift. Thank you, Andy, so much. I really appreciate that very, very much. For some reason, it popped up, but I didn't see it before. But thank you, Andy. Really appreciate your support. But I'm going to be doing the continuing what I've been doing pretty much forever, which is the regular interviews that are pre-recorded and edited. But I'm going to start to do these more. I want to try to just fill it out, see how it goes. It feels like it's going pretty well. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback so far. Hopefully that'll be the case. We'll tweak it. We'll make it a little different here or there to make sure everyone's feeling like it's not giving anybody angst, or it's not, like, oh, this is good, but not quite as good as I hope to be. I'm going to try to adjust it. So please give me your feedback. I'd love your, send me an email, give me your suggestions. I would love that. But I'm going to try to have these two tracks now where it's the recorded and the live streams. It took me a while to get, honestly, a little bit brave. I mean, part of it's bravery. I don't know if any of you have ever done this, but to get onto a computer camera and think, if I do anything, it's recorded, anything I do, it's out there, and you can't edit it out, at least not easily. And so that's it. That takes a lot of bravery. And of course, anything could happen with your computer going down or what have you. There's a lot of ways in which it can be a little bit fearful. And I'll admit, I was a little bit fearful of getting into live streams for a while, but I'm glad we're doing it. I think it's going pretty well. I'll get the hang of it. I'll figure out the bumps along the way. But thank you so much again for everyone joining me. Really appreciate it. And if you have time to come on tonight at 7 p.m. is just like an open mic live stream. I'm going to just I'll chat about a few things. I'll have a little list of things in case it gets quiet. But it's basically a time for people to come in and either do a quick question, like Q&A with me, or to come on the video and just share something in your heart. Come on for 3 to 5 minutes. Nobody's going to dominate. This isn't like we're interviewing somebody. I don't want anybody to dominate. Just come on for 3 to 5 minutes, share your thoughts, and then we'll jump into someone else's thoughts next. But anyway, thank you again. Love you all so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.